Hey, how are you doing? In today's video, I want to talk to you about what the Bible says about the loneliness strong men hide. You know, there's this thing that happens. It starts small. A tough day at work. You don't mention it to anyone. Your wife asks how your day was and you say, "Fine, nothing to worry about." She knows you're lying, but she doesn't push. So you get away with it. Days turn into weeks. Weeks turn into months. And somewhere in that silence, something inside you starts to die. Not dramatically, not all at once. Just a slow, quiet erosion. You're still showing up, still providing, still being strong. But inside, you're alone in a way that nobody, not even your wife, not even your closest friend, could ever understand. Because the moment you admit you're struggling, the moment you say the words out loud, you're admitting you're not the man everyone thinks you are. And that terrifies you more than anything else ever could. The walls get higher, the silence gets deeper. And one day you wake up and realize you've been living in isolation for so long that you don't even remember what connection feels like anymore. If you're carrying something heavy right now, if you're exhausted from pretending everything's fine, hit that subscribe button. Because what I'm about to show you isn't just some motivational speech. It's about the deepest human need that most men are trained to ignore. And when that need goes unmet for long enough, the consequences are devastating. Not just for you, but for everyone around you. But to understand how this all started, we need to go back to where you learned to be this way. And on that day, everything seemed perfectly normal. You were a kid, maybe 7 or 8 years old, and something happened that didn't feel good. Maybe your dad told you, "Don't cry like a girl. Men don't do that." Or maybe your mom was dealing with her own problems, and you learned that telling her you were scared or hurt just added to her burden. So you stopped telling her. You stopped telling anyone. You learned a lesson that day, a lesson so deep it became invisible to you. The lesson was this: your feelings are a liability. Your vulnerability is a weakness. Your pain is something you handle alone, in the dark, where nobody has to see it. That lesson saved you, in a way. It made you tough. It made you capable. It made you the kind of man people turn to when things fall apart. Promotions came. Responsibility increased. Your wife loved your strength. Your kids respected your stability. So you kept building that wall, brick by brick, year after year. And for a long time, it worked. You had everything a man's supposed to want. Then the real break came. Not the first wound. That happened decades ago. The real break was the moment you realized the strength that saved you was also destroying you. Maybe it was a health scare. Maybe your marriage started feeling empty, even though nothing was technically wrong. Maybe you hit a season in your career where nothing you did seemed to matter anymore, and instead of talking about it, you just worked longer hours, drank more whiskey, and went to bed earlier. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe you just woke up one day and realized you couldn't remember the last time you had a real conversation with anyone. Not small talk. Not logistics about bills and schedules. A real, honest, vulnerable conversation where you said what you actually felt. And in that moment, something inside you broke. Not the strong part. That was still standing. But the human part. The part that needed to be known. The part that needed connection. That part was gasping for air, and you'd been holding its head underwater for so long that you'd almost forgotten it existed. But here's what most men don't realize. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part came after. The worst part was the loneliness. Not the absence of people. You probably had plenty of people around you. The worst part was the silence. The specific, deafening silence of being surrounded by people and knowing that not a single one of them actually knows you. Your wife sees the husband. Your kids see the father. Your co-workers see the professional. But John Silver, The actual man behind all of that, nobody sees him. And after years of that kind of loneliness, you start to believe that nobody could ever see him, that he's not worth knowing, that he's too broken, too weak, too far gone. And that belief will kill you slower than anything else ever could. If you're sitting there right now and something in what I'm saying is hitting too close to home, if you've ever felt that particular kind of silence, leave a comment down below. I read every single one, and I want you to know you're not alone in this. Now, let me tell you about a man in the Bible who knew this loneliness. And I mean, he really knew it. His name was Job. And before I go any further, I want you to understand something. Job wasn't some ancient saint who had it all figured out. He was a real man, a wealthy man, respected, powerful, the kind of man other men looked up to. But he was also isolated in a way that almost nobody understood. When everything in Job's life fell apart, and I mean everything, his friends showed up. 3 of them, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. And here's the thing, they came with good intentions. They genuinely wanted to help. They sat with him for 7 days and 7 nights. But when Job finally opened his mouth and told them the truth about his pain, about his confusion, about his anger at God, they didn't know what to do with it. So they did what so many people do when a man speaks his truth. They tried to fix it. They tried to explain it. They tried to make sense of it so they wouldn't have to just sit in the pain with him. They kept saying things like, "Job, you must have done something wrong. God doesn't hurt the innocent. So let's figure out what you did, and then you can fix it, and then you can move on." And with every word they spoke, Job felt more alone. Not less, more. Because they were proving the thing he was most afraid of, that his pain wasn't worth understanding, that his experience wasn't valid, that he needed to get over it and move on. And Job, this man who was supposed to be so strong that he could handle anything, Job sat there, surrounded by his friends, and felt utterly, completely, devastatingly alone. He didn't have the language for what he was experiencing. He just knew that everything inside him was collapsing. His kids were gone, his health was destroyed, his reputation was ruined. But the worst part, and this is what I want you to hear, the worst part wasn't losing things. The worst part was losing the person he thought he was. Because when you've spent your entire life being the strong one, the reliable one, the man who has it together, and suddenly you don't have it together anymore, you don't know who you are. Job sat in his pain, and he said things out loud that good religious men weren't supposed to say. He questioned God. He expressed anger. He admitted that he wanted to die. And in those moments, Job was more honest than he'd ever been, more real, more human, and also more alone than he'd ever felt, because the few people around him couldn't handle his honesty. They wanted the strong version of Job, the successful version, the version that didn't require them to be uncomfortable. But here's what changed everything for Job. It wasn't when his friends finally gave up and stopped talking. It wasn't when his circumstances improved. It wasn't when he got his wealth back or had more children or his health was restored. What changed everything was when Job finally stopped pretending. When he stopped trying to be strong enough to handle this alone. When he admitted, out loud, to God, to himself, that he couldn't do this by himself anymore. He was broken. He was angry. He was confused. And he was going to stay that way until somebody actually saw him. And that's when something shifted. Not because God suddenly made everything better, but because Job finally told the truth. And the truth, no matter how painful it is always more healing than the lie. Now, let me bring this back to you. Back to the loneliness you've been hiding. Because what I want you to understand, based on 30 years of sitting with men in my office, is this. The strength that's gotten you this far is real. Your ability to carry weight, to show up, to provide, to stay stable, That's not fake. That's not weakness hiding under a mask. That's genuine strength. But here's what nobody tells you. Strength that never admits weakness isn't strength. It's fragility. It's a house of cards. And the moment anything pushes hard enough, it all comes down. Starting today, I want you to do something different. I want you to find one person. Not everyone. You don't have to tell your whole story to the world, but one person. Maybe it's your wife. Maybe it's a counselor, like I am. Maybe it's a close friend or a mentor. But one person who you're going to tell the truth to. And I mean the real truth. Not the edited version. Not the version that makes you look strong. The actual, messy, complicated, vulnerable truth. When you sit down with that person, here's what I want you to say. I need to tell you something, and it's going to be hard for me because I'm not used to doing this. But I can't keep carrying this alone anymore. That's it. That's the beginning. Because the moment you say those words out loud to another human being, something shifts. The weight doesn't disappear. The problems don't magically solve themselves. But you're no longer alone in the darkness. You're no longer the only one who knows. And that right there, is the beginning of healing. I've seen this happen hundreds of times. I've watched men sit in my office, tight-jawed, ready to soldier through whatever I was about to suggest, and then they'll say something like, I haven't told anyone this, but... And in that moment, the person they're talking to, whether it's me, or their wife, or a friend, they always say the same thing. They say something like, thank you for trusting me with this. That took courage. And you know what happens next? The man will sometimes cry. Sometimes he'll just sit there in silence. But something inside him will settle, because he's no longer alone. He's been seen. He's been known. And he's still standing. The second thing I want you to do is this. Stop equating vulnerability with weakness. I know that's easier said than done. I know your whole life has been built on the opposite principle. But here's what 30 years of work has taught me. The men who heal are never the ones who toughen up and push through. The men who heal are the ones who get honest about how much pain they're in. Job had to get there. You have to get there too. And the third thing, and this is crucial, you need to understand that the people who love you, your wife, your kids, your close friends, they don't need you to be perfect. They need you to be real. Because when you're only showing them the strong version, when you're only letting them see the man who has it all together, they can't actually love you. They can only love the version you're showing them. And that's the deepest loneliness of all. Because you're never truly known. So here's what I want you to commit to. Starting today, you're going to have one honest conversation. Just one. You're going to tell one person something true about your struggle. And then you're going to notice what happens. You're going to notice that the world doesn't end. Your wife doesn't leave you. Your boss doesn't fire you. And the person you told, they're going to look at you differently. Not with pity, but with respect. Because vulnerability, real vulnerability, is where actual strength lives. I started this video by talking about a man who's been hiding his loneliness, who's been pretending everything's fine, who wakes up every day and carries weight he was never supposed to carry alone. I talked about how that isolation eats away at you, slowly, quietly, until one day you realize you don't even know yourself anymore. But I also told you about Job, a man who lost everything, who hit rock bottom, who felt more alone than any man should ever feel, but who found his way back, not by getting stronger, but by finally getting honest, by finally admitting he couldn't do it alone. That's the man you can be, not the version that pretends everything's fine, but the version that's strong enough to say, I'm struggling and I need help. That's the man your wife actually wants. That's the man your kids need. That's the man you can become, starting right now. So before you close this video, I want you to do something for me. Hit that like button. It helps us reach men who are sitting in that exact same silence. Subscribe to this channel.